one of the influences you had as being an artist where you had babysitters that were artists. How early was that of an experience? Like, and what type of art did they do? And what was your first, like I guess, like, first realization, like, even maybe as a little kid, like, oh, they're artists and they do this thing called art. Like, when did all that, like, click, and what was that like growing up?
Yeah, I would love to give background on that. That all started, I had to have been early into elementary school, I would say. So they were my babysitters, but the main role they played in my life, they were personal care assistants for my oldest brother, Jonathan. He has severe cerebral palsy. So we always had PCAs, is what we called them. We would always have PCAs around. And the first two PCAs that I remember being inspired by when it came to my creativity, they were best friends, which is funny. So one of the individuals was a PCA, and then I think she had brought on her best friend, and they were both really great at art. And I remember as they were, tending to my brother's needs, they always made sure to give myself and my other brother just as much attention. And it was always us doing these elaborate projects utilizing like cardboard boxes. We always had cardboard boxes laying around the house. So we would take the box and like flip it on its side and turn it into like a house. And I remember one of the first ones I did, which had my mind blown, was this cool party house with a pool on top. And we would make the people figures out of paper and popsicle sticks. And I just remember as I was playing with the box, it felt real. And that, I think, was a majority of the projects we would do, is just recreating like real life scenes out of just materials laying around the house.
So art imitating life.
Yeah, which was great. Yeah, that's how it started. But they were really great at sketching. And so I was always in my room drawing. It usually was me drawing something I would see, or just weird figurines. I was always trying to be creative in some way. But my PCAs and the babysitters always would introduce something new to me, which always kept me like wanting more when it came to arts and crafts.
So you said you were painting, but I'm also hearing like working on like I guess figurines and just making like maybe like making your own toys almost.
Yeah.
What led to, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it seems like painting more so abstract art, and specifically abstract art using spray paint, using spray cans. What led you to that? Like, what led you to those type of tools and that type of medium?
I'd say in college, I had met a partner at the time I was dating, and her major was in the art field. And I think she was actually the first one to kind of introduce me to paints. I never would buy paints and paint on my own. So we would play around with like acrylics and spray paint and just go to Michael's and grab some canvases. And we would just paint anything that we felt. And so we were doing it together, and we started selling our art together. From there, that's when I kind of stuck with it. So throughout college and after college, I would just paint canvases for fun. I would go outside. I was living with my parents at the time. They live towards the end of college. And then I kind of stepped away from my art for a little. I started working in IT. And so that was a whole new world for me, like having a 9-to-5 job. I didn't know how to balance all the hobbies that I used to have so much time for. And so years had went by before I started really taking it seriously again.
Besides, having all these, like, I don't want to say real life sets in, but like, because I think that's kind of a cliched argument. Like, the life you live is real life, but having the job in IT, which I want to get to that in a second, because we were talking about that before, but having the job in IT and then trying to balance everything. Because I remember in another interview where you had mentioned you had to walk away from art, and you just mentioned it now. what was it about that? Was it just that like that 9-to-5 job? And why not try to make, I guess, art the 9-to-5 job, which I know some people do. Hey, if I can't make money directly off my thing, I'll be adjacent to my thing. So for example, like if I'm a musician, okay, I'll work in a record store, or I'll work at a place that sells musical gear. Like if you're a visual artist, maybe you do get a job at like a craft store or an art supply store. So why not that? And what made you go, yes, I have to walk away from art completely? This thing that had been enveloping your life, at least up until a college point.
That's a great question. I feel like there's two parts that come to my mind when I want to answer that. The first part is I felt like I didn't know who I was as an artist. It felt like I was painting and creating, but what for? And so that was a big piece, is like, I don't know why I'm doing this. It wasn't fulfilling me when I knew it used to. So I feel like that was a part of why I kind of walked away, because I didn't know how to navigate that at the time. I don't think I had given myself the grace or time to dive deep within myself. Now I have the tools, and I can talk about that more in a bit. But the other part was, that's a good question. Oh, sorry. I just completely lost my train of thought. Damn, I wanted to answer that differently. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, just, besides the job, besides the job in IT.
Yeah, like why didn't I go full force with my art?
Either try to just live solely off your art, or get a job that's like adjacent to the art. Like, was there other things besides just the job and the time balance that made you walk away from pursuing art or from practicing artwork?
I honestly, not majoring in art was like a guilt that I had. I'm thankful for my IT career, and I did that in college as well, and that helped me get my job. But not majoring in art made me feel like, okay, how am I going to, make this my living? Like, how could this be my full-time career if I don't have a lot of, professional experience? That was the way I was thinking back then. So I was like, maybe it's not for me. Which now, moving forward, I've realized that you don't need a degree to do what it is that you love. It's how bad do you want it, and where do you see it taking you, and what are you going to do to get there?
Do you think how you define success also plays into that? Like how an individual defines success?
I clarify some more. Like
one person, their version of success is, hey, I can make enough to like take myself on a nice trip. Or another person, their version of success is, no, I'm not successful until I get my own gallery show. Or another person's like, I'm not successful until I'm like famous.
Yeah, I think my mindset was very different in, I would say, around 2018. That's when I graduated college. I looked at success as, I have to do this, this, and that if I'm going to be successful. I think I was more fear-driven then when it came to my craft. Years later, I would say that completely shifted, and I go about my craft in a more fearless way, because it's not about, I want to achieve this, this, and that. It's more so, how does it make me feel?
So it's not the brass rings or the prize of success.
It would be great, right? Like I would love
it's great,
that.
but that's not the main motivator.
It's not I've realized it's not my purpose anymore when it comes to my craft in art. It's about me and how I'm moved, emotionally, spiritually when I create, and how I can be of use in my community to collaborate and network with other creatives to create a space where we're all inspired and we're all doing these things that are making us happy and feel like we have purpose here on earth. So yeah, I would say my definition of success has changed over the years for the better, I feel like.
So one thing that I noticed from you had mentioned briefly your IT career and your IT degree. So multi-part question.
No degree in IT. Sorry.
Oh, all right. Experience in IT.
Yes.
What do you think about, and I've noticed this too, because I have a background in IT.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed like musicians or artists or creative types, either they'll go into IT or they'll go into like the trades.
Mm.
Like they'll like that's not like it's not an abnormal thing. And just as somebody who's also done the whole IT and then also working on your artwork or your creative stuff, like, do you think there's like a pattern there? Or because we were talking about this earlier before the show started.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've noticed a lot of people in IT, at least for myself, where I previously worked, a lot of us either played instruments or had a love for art, whether that was painting or pottery, ceramics. I definitely think there's a pattern. I don't know exactly what that pattern is, but the one thing that comes to my mind is I love IT because I can be very hands-on and also, around people, and I'm constantly like problem solving. I feel like when it comes to my art or when it comes to music, I have to constantly be stimulated and like either learning a new skill or trying to learn a song. I don't know if that goes hand in hand. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, I need to do a little bit more research on that one.
It makes me wonder if, like, how should I put this? I feel like this is getting less and less now, but it's also the thoughts about college are changing, because you had mentioned that in college you were with your partner and you were painting, but I'm assuming you didn't major in art because you were saying you had like a almost like a guilt about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did your parents try to push you towards a certain type of degree, or did your parents try to push you towards like maybe away from it or towards it sometimes? Because I'm just curious as to why not try to major in art or go to an art school, etc.
Yeah, I think, before I started applying for college, art was always in the back of my head, but I never really vocalized it because I already knew that there would be some sort of judgment of you're not going to make money, right? There's always this stigma with art that, oh, why are you majoring in art? Like, how are you going to be successful? So that was always in the back of my head. My mom is extremely supportive in anything I do. She's like my biggest fan. My dad's extremely supportive as well. But my dad's a little bit more old-fashioned when it comes to career. I remember in college, I went in, doing business, and that was a flop because math ? But I remember
that's also the other thing too. Just a brief aside, like, I'm a creative and I'm bad at math, yet I was good at IT. I want to understand how that part works, because like I also knew other IT people that were horrible at math, and I'm like, how does that work?
And they
We're
say
working
you're
with
supposed
things.
to be good at math when you play instruments or when you're in the music field. I don't know.
We're debunking a lot of myths on this show.
It didn't work for me. But no. So I went in studying business. That didn't work out, and I remember being in a place of distraught because I didn't have a backup plan. And I remember I went to the career center and I took a bunch of tests, and it narrowed down to either social work, psychology, art, or criminal justice. And I remember looking at art like, yes, this would be so much fun, right? My partner, I have friends that, are in the art field, and I would go with them to, the art buildings and watch them like work on their projects. And I was like, this should be me. But I always had that voice in the back of my head, like, but you want to make money, right? So no, you have to scratch that out. So I remember choosing social work, which also does not make you money. So who knows what I was really doing there. But that's when I started getting into IT, which kind of shifted things for me. I remember going to my dad and telling him, I'm majoring in social work, but I'm really liking working in IT at my college. And he was like, go for IT. you're going to make more money. Go for IT. And that's where I was like, okay, like that's what I have to do. So art just became like white noise in a way. I just never looked back because IT also was another one of my passions. And yeah, it took me a while to circle back and revisit how I could use my art and get back into my art and to feel like I was friends with it in a way again because I had abandoned it for so long.
Speaking of stigmas, because you were mentioning that, do you think there is a stigma around certain types of art? Like certain types of art are more socially acceptable than others? Considering you work in the medium of spray paint, spray cans, do you think that there's a stigma around it? And why do you think that certain stigmas exist around certain types of art, but not others?
I feel like I get to answer this in so many different ways. Yes, I do feel I'm like a super positive person. So I'm like, no, there isn't. But I do think there is a sort of stigma around like abstract art. I think sometimes people don't understand the concept of abstract art, or for example, my paintings are very elaborate. I use bright colors. I've had to battle the reality of not everyone's going to want to hang my art in their home, right? People sometimes don't like the, bright colors or, a painting that they can look at and be like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like if their mind isn't open enough to look at that abstract piece and to be able to interpret it in their own way, like how do these movements make you feel? How are these colors making you feel? Like not everyone views abstract art that way. So I could see there being a stigma around it. And then you have more, I guess, in society, more acceptable mediums like graphic, right? Digital, right? Graphic art, you can do so much more and make a lot of money off of it because there's businesses that need it. You know what I mean? So I've always, I would say, it's been challenging to, be fresh with how I can, make a living off of the type of art that I do, which is why I've been exploring other avenues within different mediums. But yeah, I would say there's absolutely a stigma around certain mediums. I haven't experienced it myself fully, and so I don't know if I could relate as much as maybe other artists. But I would think there is different views.
Switching from stigmas, do you think that there are certain mediums or certain types of art that are valued or overvalued or not valued properly versus others? So what I mean by that is, I think it was a couple of years back, and I've been to Art Basel a couple times, but this was a year where I didn't go, and thankfully, because the story was there was the piece where it was the banana duct taped to the wall, and it was worth like that piece, and I'm saying this with air quotes here, that piece was worth like thousands upon thousands of dollars, and then like a guy ate the banana and he would have to pay the person who thing, and then that was worth, the guy eating the banana became like an art piece and that was worth $1,000, and like people are willing to spend money on that for God knows what reason, maybe money laundering or something, but like people are willing to spend money on that, or they'd be willing to spend money on like a wall painting that's in IKEA while buying the other furniture, but like buying art from somebody on like Etsy or at like a local fair, it's like, no, that's not worth it. It's so what do you think goes into that, and like how do you value not just your own artwork, but like how do you go about like, oh, I want to buy that piece of artwork that this person did? Like, how do you go about that decision-making process? And why are some pieces of art, like whether they're more collectible or they're able to get money than other people, that because quality is subjective, right? Why do you think that is, being an artist yourself? Just want to get your perspective on that.
It's not fair. For example, the banana on the wall. At the end of the day, that's art, right? Who knows the vision behind it? I think everything is art. It doesn't matter how good it is, how bad it is. Like, I don't even look at like that spectrum, but I do think that sometimes there's a lot of hype around stuff like that. This one's tough. When it comes to buying art for myself, I have always been someone that I want to get to know who is the artist, like what is their story, what was their vision. I feel like I fall more in love with who the person is and what their vision was, their background, which then makes me fall in love with the pieces that they're selling. And so at that point, the price is their price. And I respect the way people price their product because you have to think about, one, the artists themselves. This is, their job. How much time did they put into it? The materials. All those things come together, and that's why I value that person's work and I'm willing to pay the price. I don't think it's even a thought. But when it comes to overhyping stuff, I don't know, man. This one's hard. I don't understand. I feel like people sometimes, the people that are willing to hype up something like the banana on the wall are not fully there to understand the art itself or maybe the emotion that goes into the piece. And I feel like it drives from selfishness, greed. At that point, it's like you're looking at the dollar sign, how much the banana is selling for, instead of, focusing on the artists themselves. And so, I don't know.
It's just more about the sticker shock of the piece rather than, hey, I like this artist or this artwork. It's, look how much money I spent on this thing.
Yeah,
Not necessarily the thing, but hey, look how much money I spent on this thing.
It's so unfortunate because there's a lot of amazing local artists that don't get enough spotlight, that their pieces are phenomenal. That's a hard one. That's the reality, unfortunately, that we live in.
We live in a culture of flexing.
Yeah, flex.
It's like, this art, yeah, whatever. Like, I spent $500. It's good because I spent $500,000 on it, right? That means it's good, right? Like that kind of thinking.
Yeah. Sigh.
Speaking of old ways of thinking, so you're originally from Taunton.
I am.
And we're here in Pawtucket, and you're in Providence, also in Boston. My question is, yes, we've had a lot of advancements and there's a lot of like barriers being broken down with technology and the internet and things being, we have world of information in the palm of our hand, right? Mm-hmm. Is there still an advantage of, if you're a creative person, being in a more city, like a more high activity city setting? Yes, Taunton's not far from Boston, but Providence is closer to Taunton than Boston is, and it's, I guess, busy enough for you or for others. So is there still an advantage? Is there still an advantage of being in a city setting if you're a creative? Is there than not being in that setting?
To some extent, yeah, I would say so. I think since moving out here in Rhode Island, I've had more opportunities and there's more events that are going on. There's more probability that I'll be able to network and meet other creatives, whereas in Taunton, unfortunately, they don't put on a lot of events that attract people my age or like creatives like us. So I would say for me, it was an advantage. But then I think about Boston, right? Like if I lived in Boston, I feel like there would be a sense of like competition in a way because it's bigger and I feel like there's a lot more creatives, and I'm never one to ever feel like I need to compete, but I feel like there's a possibility that the opportunities might be slim, and that's just my honesty. Yeah, I guess there's two parts. It is an advantage, but also I think that it could also be a feeling of competitiveness being in a bigger city filled with more creatives. But I have had nothing but beautiful experiences living in Pawtucket and being surrounded by Providence and all of the artists here. The vibe is very warm and welcoming, and a lot of great things have come about from my craft just being here. So I'm enjoying it.
I have a question that I think plagues a lot of creatives or people who want to be a creative. Mm-hmm. And that question is this: How do you start a new project or a new piece? Even like we know the medium that you work in. We know that you use spray paints a lot and it's abstract. But how do you decide to start? Like how do you start? Do you have to get yourself in a certain mindset? Do you just start and then there's like a bunch of different versions and then there's finally one that keeps progressing more and then you go from there? Like how do you start? And how do you know when a piece is finished?
Ooh. Remind me that second question because I may forget as I'm explaining this first part.
Sure.
I feel like I'm always working on a project, even if I'm not putting it out there or I'm not talking about it. I'm always in my notes application on my phone, like filling in all of these visions that come across me on a day-to-day basis. Like my last project, Ain't Even Gotta Try, that came about just based off of a feeling I had. Like there was a moment where I was like, I feel like I'm too humble as an artist. I feel like I have this, aura about me and I have this gift that I want to share with the world. And with the attitude I have, as in, I feel like I'm a force to be reckoned with, right? I was sitting there like, why am I too humble? Why am I so kind about my craft? Like, why can't I just come out here with this confidence and not be afraid to show that? Like, why do I feel like me being confident about my craft is going to like hurt someone? Like, why am I so in my shell about it? And so that's what created or was the catalyst for creating Ain't Even Gotta Try. From there, I wanted to find models who I feel like exude such like effortlessness when it comes to their craft, whether they're a poet, a singer, whether they're a designer. So I wanted to just create the project around that feeling of you don't even have to try. So let's get together and let's all just like put our, I don't know if I can swear on here, but let's put our shit out there. Like, let's come together. Let's create this space. My friend Nairi, who is the photographer and the stylist and creative director on that project as well, also has that attitude. Like she's fire. Like if you see her work, it's like, yo, like, where does this come from? And so I wanted to just bring that feeling together in one room and just inspire each other and create a beautiful, visual, beautiful pictures. And it gave off exactly that. And so I think a lot of my projects come from either feelings that I have about myself that I then want to translate through other people or through a story. But this next project that I'm starting to brainstorm is coming from like my love for skateboarding. That like I grew up skating, nothing like crazy. I just loved skating around my neighborhood, but I wanted to then, create a project around that culture and like find actual skaters around Providence and, put people on. And so it always comes from like an idea, a feeling. From there, I do a lot of brainstorming. Like you see, I have my whiteboard. I'm a very visual, hands-on person. So I love having brainstorming sessions with like whoever I'm working with. So for example, Nairi and I would like meet here and like jot out all of our ideas on the whiteboard.
Is the brainstorming session also how you determine like what materials you're going to use?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, because I was always wondering if like, because like I know some certain artists like stockpile certain materials, so they're just always on hand, like in a workshop kind of setting.
Yeah,
whereas other artists, like it's just per project, or like maybe they'll have their main thing where they'll always keep like, you know, like, all right, for spray paint, like they'll always keep certain maybe cans of spray paint around in a couple of different colors, but it's really like a project by project basis. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I like to reuse a lot of like material that I already have. So the last project, Ain't Even Gotta Try, we used my studio space here, and we used that wall and recreated 4 different scenes for each model. So for example, my brother's scene, I wanted to recreate like our childhood in some way. We always would grow up playing consoles. So I went to my parents' house, grabbed the PS2, grabbed an old TV, set it up with all the games. So yeah, I like to reuse stuff. I also will thrift like items. For that last project, I thrifted a treasure chest and then painted over it. And that was like one of the main props in that project. But when I brainstorm, that's when things come up like, ooh, I could see myself like using this stool. Like, do I have it? Ooh, no. Like, okay, let me like write this down. Maybe I can thrift it. Maybe I can buy it.
So do you do this with all the different types of art you do? Do you always do brainstorming even before you start a painting as well?
For painting, no. I'll usually just try to figure out what colors I want to use, and then I'll just get right into it. But I guess for my last project, I did have to brainstorm a bit because this time I was being intentional with my paintings in a way where I knew they were going to be printed onto chiffon scarves. So knowing that someone may want to wear it on their head, I had to paint in a way where there was a lot of line work or like symmetry in some way, borders. So I would do brainstorming for those pieces. But a majority of the time when I paint, it's just, all right, what colors do I want to use? And let's just, start somewhere.
Okay.
That's a couple of different second part of the question.
No, a couple different questions that come from that. The second part of that original question, though, because we're going to stay on this for a little bit. How do you know when a painting is done? And how do you know when a project is done?
Yeah,
so I've heard different answers. I've heard sometimes when the money runs out, or it's just like whenever I feel like it's finished. So for you, when is a painting or a work or a project done for you?
I love this question because I struggle with it so much. I tend to hold on to paintings that are either unfinished or I think they're finished, but it does not feel right. I think for me, knowing when a painting is done, I have to look at it and feel like, yes, I'm satisfied. A lot of times I'll think I'm done with a painting and I'll put it up and I'll, walk back and look at it from a distance and I'll be like, nope, it's not done. And I don't have the energy to figure out what it is that's missing. And I'll put it away for a couple months and then I'll come back and something will pop in my head and then boom, I'll feel that feeling of this, I'm satisfied and it's done. But being a perfectionist, it's very excruciating. I'm very hard on myself with my art just because I'm always like wanting things to be perfect. I'll like a piece and then I'll think, is that person going to like it though? Or like, you know what I mean? So I think it's the feeling of confidence that I have that, okay, looking at this piece, I am very satisfied. I can walk away. I can gloss it, then walk away and still be happy about it. But it's hard. It's challenging.
Would you say the brainstorming is like a filtering process for maybe not a painting, but like an upcoming project? And what I mean by that is, does the brainstorming help with, hey, the project, the way I'm thinking about it in my head is like too grandiose, or it's like going to be outside of the budget, like a conceivable budget that I have right now, or like, or if I do it this way though, then like somebody else is going to own the rights to, like, the brainstorming, is that a filtering process to maybe, do you ever find yourself like, oh, I want to do this project, but then you find you have to dial it back like through the brainstorming process? Like, wow, this is like a little too crazy. Like I gotta pull it back a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Brainstorming for me is definitely the filtering process. I'm a very dreamy, visionary person. And sometimes I'll be driving and I'll think of this grand idea. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be so dope. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go write this out in my notes or on my whiteboard. And then I'll look at it and be like, but Paige, do you really have the time to do that right now? Or can this be maybe for Next summer. So for the brainstorming, yes, I filter out a lot of like, what can I realistically do without burning myself out? Because at the end of the day, I love listening to my body, especially when it comes to my craft. But it's also a way for me to be disciplined. I'm a very structured person when it comes to my work life, relationships, my craft. So when it comes to any project ideas I have, brainstorming and whiteboarding the vision out helps me have a more clean outline, especially if I'm going to collaborate with someone. I'm a big fan for professionalism. And, if I'm going to collaborate with someone on a project, I love to have my stuff clean, concise, so that they can come in and read like my outline of the vision and be like, okay.
And everybody's on the same page quickly.
Yes, I like that. I don't like to waste time. I don't like to, confuse people or make people feel like they need to do more of the heavy lifting.
By analysis, that kind of thing.
I like having my ducks in a row. And I feel like when I do have my ducks in a row, I feel like it creates a sense of comfortability for the person I'm working with to then feel like, okay, like this is going to be great. There's more like trust there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One question that I have deriving from that as you were going through, and I was going to ask this later, but I figured this is probably a better time to ask this now. How much does the medium that you work in, let me give an example before I go into the question. So an example of this would be like Quentin Tarantino. So I read an interview for that Kill Bill. There was Kill Bill parts 1 and 2. He went to the studio and he wanted it to be presented as one long movie because he, as a kid, and even like before he worked in a video store, he would go to like the matinees where they'd have like a movie back to back. Like that influenced in the drive-ins, the same thing. That influenced the presentation of, I think it was Grindhouse and the other one he did with Robert Rodriguez. But anyway, like he wanted to do this idea of just presenting Kill Bill parts 1 and 2 with like an intermission, like a 10-minute intermission. It would have been like 4.5 hours long. And the studio was like, there's no way in hell we're gonna, like, we love you, Quentin, but like there's no way in hell we're doing that. And so he had to concede. And then later on, The Hateful Eight was shorter, but he got that intermission and they presented it in like a special super wide format because it was the Roadshow edition. Actually, I remember now. So apparently he was able to convince the studio to present it that way. The reason why I make those examples is, does the medium of the whatever project you're working on, how much of that dictates the art? Or do you get surprised that it maybe takes the art in a different direction? Or, do you think, hey, I'm going to do this project, but then the medium that you're working in. So I don't know, like, let's say, for example's sake, you were like, I'm going to make a short film. And then there are things you realized about film that, oh, this thing's not going to translate from my idea. Or like, I have to do it this way because the medium dictates it. Have you ever run into that where the medium or the platform of what you're doing dictates or makes you change your artistic decisions?
I hope I understood and am answering this right. I think my last project is a good example, possibly. So with that project, Ain't Even Gotta Try, I was releasing canvases, but the main medium was the scarves. Okay. And so that was a big shift for me because, not a lot of my canvases sell, and that's okay. But I was like, I see myself making a living off of this, right? Like being in museums, I know that's going to take a while, but what can I do right now to challenge myself to see if I can like make some sort of income off of my craft? And so that's where I wanted to dip into like my love for fashion. And that's where the scarves came about. And the outcome of that drop shifted, I think, how I'm going about future projects, because I'm seeing like that's a medium that I did not know people would really like appreciate. And now I'm like, okay, so where do I go now?
That flows perfectly into my next two questions, okay, actually. Cool. So the first part, why did you choose scarves? Just because, and this is going to lead into the next question, but why did you choose scarves? Because especially when it comes to like artisan clothing, I feel like, you know, t-shirts are usually more like, I don't want to say the natural progression, but it's like the thing where it's like everybody's kind of expecting like t-shirts or hoodies or sweaters. I'm not saying I hate these things, but if you can hear the strain in my voice, it's because like everybody does it.
Same.
So like maybe that's the reason why. But like, what made you choose scarves? Like that makes sense.
So the first part is exactly what you were stressing over.
Wow, you could just hear in my voice like he's. It's like I don't think he likes sweaters or t-shirts that much. Do you think?
Noted. No, honestly, like I'm not even gonna lie. I get offended when people are like, oh, "You should put your art on a t-shirt. You should put your art on a bag." And it's like,
see, I want to get offended by that because I'm like, okay, you're a fan, like you want to see it. I get it.
Right. It's like I appreciate you. Like I appreciate that, but like you said, everyone does it, and I think I've always held on to this uniqueness that I hold as an individual, and I want that to, you know, translate into my art. So I chose scarves because, one, to my previous comment, I wanted to, you know, show more love to my love for fashion, right? Like I love to, you know, style myself. I used to, you know, be in a fashion club in college with friends and put on fashion shows and meetings, and, you know, not having that anymore. I was like, okay, like I still feel like there's a cup that's not being filled when it comes to fashion. So what is it with my art that I can do that's not cliche, that I feel like people will jive with? And so scarves is something that I feel like is very versatile. You can wear it on your head. You can style it as a top. You can wear it as a belt. You can style it on your bag, in your pocket. And so I started thinking of all these ways. And I feel like fashion right now, accessorizing is key. And so I wanted that to be a way for my art to get out there in the world. And so far it's been super cool, honestly, seeing people pop up styling my scarf in a way that I didn't even imagine. It's like, ooh, this is exactly what I was going for. It's like, you look fly. Like, not only like are you wearing my art and supporting me, like you genuinely look fly. And that's super creative for you to style it in this way or that way. Yeah.
Do you think certain mediums flow and work well with others? So for example, you did the scarves and I had just mentioned like, hey, why not do t-shirts? Why not do sweaters, ... because that's the natural progression. However, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense if you're a visual artist that does canvases that you did a scarf, because a scarf, when you lay it out, it's like a rectangular piece of clothing. So if you're doing a graphic and you have to resize it a little bit, you have to think about patterns and it being worn, but you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel, right? Do you think that there are certain mediums that lend well to each other? And do you think people always make those connections? Because like, as I'm talking about and thinking about it, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense that you actually went into the medium of scarves, but it took me a second. So do you think that like there are certain mediums or types of art that blend well? Like, hey, if you do this type of art, you'll probably do well if you translate those skills into this other medium or this other area. And do you think people can always make those connections?
I don't know if people always make those connections. I feel like the story behind it will always helps people to understand. But I would say yes. I think certain mediums can translate well into others. I like don't want to give away my next project idea, but I'll think about an idea that I had a couple years ago that I just never pursued, but it's still in the back of my head. But like living wear, right? Like pillowcases, right? You know, accent pillows on couches. I feel like that's a big thing. So I was thinking of like, oh, I could also like print my art and do like an accent pillowcase and have a photo shoot of like someone's home with these different pieces. I absolutely think that I feel like all art can translate well into each other. It just depends on how you're showcasing it and like what the story is and what the vision that you're trying to put out there with your art.
besides the medium or the platform, hey, like I'm a filmmaker, so I work in film. Mm-hmm. But I was just mentioning the Tarantino example of he got The Hateful Eight presented in like a special wider format, and they did an interlude because it was the Roadshow edition. Like they gave little programs out, mm-hmm. right? So that added to the experience. Yeah. So what you had just mentioned, I want to ask, how much does the where and the how the art is presented? Because if you took the same piece of artwork and you presented it at like the Wickford Art Fair versus a gallery in downtown Providence, mm-hmm. even though it's the same art and you don't put like a plaque near or anything, the artist isn't even there. I feel like it would be, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it would be received differently. And I feel like the price tag, like if you ask people, how much do you think the artist is charging for this? I feel like the price tag perception would change too. Yeah. How much does the presentation of the artwork play into its perceived value? And on top of that, do you think sometimes the artist is like so in love with their own work they don't maybe know how to present it to like maximize its potential? Because they may want to present it a certain way, but hey, if you presented it this way, you may get more interest, you may actually sell a piece. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, how much does the presentation play into it? And then how much is the artist aware of the presentation, or should they maybe sometimes give that to somebody else? Do they hand that off to somebody else? Do they hand it off to a gallery? Like what happens if the gallery presents it in a way and the artist is like, oh, we didn't know, we didn't talk about this.
Yeah, I think presentation goes a long way. I'm going to keep bringing up examples because I feel like that's how I can answer questions the best sometimes. For Ain't Even Gotta Try, the presentation was a big thing for me. It was like, how am I going to roll this out and really catch people's attention as to what it is that I'm trying to create? So I focused a lot on the promotion and the rollout itself. I wanted to give off a feel of euphoria and very like Y2K type of feel, home video type feel along with the visual. And I feel like when I released like 4 snippets of each scarf, because I had 4 scarves, each model that modeled a scarf, I chose that scarf based on the model. Like, we could see Gabby wearing this scarf, right? And she plays drums. Let's recreate like this scene with a drum set and with all these instruments and music. Like that's who Gabby embodies. And I feel like that was the presentation that I was trying to put out for each scarf, is like, I want people to look at, these photos of Gabby or this visual of Gabby, playing the drums or being surrounded by music and feel like it's personable. And so I feel like when you can make your art relatable or personable, it makes people, one, feel, and I feel like it can inspire people to want to do the same for themselves. So presentation is always key for me. I feel like that's how I get people intrigued to learning more about me and my craft. To the second part of your question, are artists aware of, you said, how much the presentation goes into play?
Yeah, like are they aware of it, or is it, or I guess, how much does the presentation go into play, and could the artist possibly not be presenting their own work correctly, at least for the goal of either selling it or the goal of it being better received or more publicly well received?
I feel like
some artists, they're like, here, just put it in the gallery. And then some artists are like, no, it must be in this space with this kind of lighting, with this shade of light. Some are super specific and some are not. And I just don't know where you fall into that camp, or like maybe you could explain why some are so meticulous just with like, no, it has to be presented this way, or I'm I'm taking my toys and going home type of attitude. Yeah. And some artists are like, hang it up, like whatever, I'm on to my next thing.
I feel like there's layers to that. I don't ever like to assume people's processes, but for me, I'm very meticulous. Like when I have a vision, I dream it, I see it, and I'm going to make it come to life in whichever way I can, surrounding my budget, of course, right? But I feel like some artists just do it and they don't care about, the accolades, or they don't care about what people think. And more power to them, because to not care is like beautiful, but it, I don't know, that's really hard. I feel like I can answer that in so many ways. Me saying like they might not care has nothing to do with like their art being less than. I feel like some people just genuinely enjoy painting or doing their craft or whatever medium that they like for themselves. Whereas like I do it for myself, but I also appreciate feedback, and I appreciate being, social and networking, being out there like in the art scene. I love for people to get to know me as an artist so that they can put both knowing me and my art together. Some people don't really need that or like care for that, and that's totally okay. But for me, I love to be very pristine with how I'm showcasing my art, because it can bring a story to life for some people. And if I'm able to do that, then my job was like done.
So you're talking about having a vision and being meticulous. Is there ever a concern, or has there ever been a situation where you put out a piece and I get it, like art can be interpreted so many different ways, but if an artist has a specific vision and then the general public or most of the general public have a different reception of it, it could be a complete 180. Do you consider that good, bad, indifferent? Has it ever happened to you? Does it ever concern you? Or it's just like, hey, it's getting out there. However you want to digest it is how you want to digest it.
I guess it depends on the project. I would say one of my first projects I dropped, Reclamation of the Creative Mind. And this is never the end goal of like how many people will like, this video or so on. But I would say that one didn't get a lot of attention, but it didn't bother me because that project itself was so transformative for me spiritually. And it was the project that really set me off to be more consistent with my craft. So that itself was like a win. My last project, because I put so much like time, effort, money into it, I think if it were I don't even want to say fail, because I don't think anyone art fails, but if it didn't receive the attention that I was hoping for, I think it would have bummed me out. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that, but it does not take away from the art. But yeah, a lot of the art that I do is for myself, but it's always lovely to have people, show their, support and their interest in what I do. It kind of fuels me and drives me to, want to put out even more art and inspire others.
I was going to ask you, do you think about this thing, but what are we at the 1 hour mark? I'll know to edit that out. See, now I needed the editing out, not you, me. Can you walk me through the process from beginning to end of selling your first piece of art, where like you did the selling yourself, meaning like you created it, you figured out how to price it somehow, you sold it, you got paid for it. Can you just walk through that whole process and what that feeling was like, and just like, how did you get to the decision? Yes, I'm going to sell this. What were the factors that went into pricing? How did you decide online or in person? Like this. And then finally, like when you made the sale, was there a feeling of like, was it just like, okay, cool? Or was it just like on to the next one, or like, holy shit, I did it?
It was holy shit, I did it. Like times 1,000. Okay. Because, I really, really appreciate this question. So when I first started realizing like, okay, I'm consistent with my art. I want to sell my art. I want to see where this takes me. One of the first things I did was work on my website. And that would have me on cloud 9 every time I was editing it. The more I was editing it, the more like realistic everything was becoming. And I hadn't even sold like a canvas from my website yet. I had done like art shows and like I sold paintings to family members, but this was like, I'm going live and I'm like telling people like I'm selling my art now. So building the website was awesome. You know, being able to, you know, also working in IT, I was fulfilling that passion as well. So it was exciting. When I first launched the website and I got a notification that one of my canvases sold, it was emotional. I'm not even going to lie. I got very emotional because I never saw myself like at that place of, I have a website now. I'm listing art and people are clicking a link and showing interest enough to purchase my art and they want to hang it up. Like, what? Like, it just made me feel like I was on top of the world. And I was very grateful for God and for, you know, my family that have always appreciated the artistic side of me and never neglected it or turned a blind eye to it. So it was like a full circle moment for me. And I still get excited to this day, like when I'm like listing art or when someone like shows interest in wanting to purchase a piece, it's like, okay, like, yeah, I can do this. But yeah, it was a holy shit feeling for sure.
What goes into the pricing of a piece? Like, because you were talking about before, but like you were saying hard. Like, oh, how the artist sets the price and that's the price. So like, so for you, like, cause I feel like this is, if there's like another artist listening to this, this is probably a question that they're probably struggling with. So how do you go about into like pricing one of your canvas pieces or pricing your scarves? Like besides the material and your time, like what other factors like where you're like, yep, this price makes sense?
It's not easy at all because I'm like my worst enemy. I will want to price something at what I feel like it should be priced. And then I'll get into my head of, well, what if this person thinks that's too expensive? They're going to look at me like I'm trying to scam everyone. When it's not that. It's like you said, it's the materials. It's the time that I spent putting into not just like painting the canvas, but when we were talking about brainstorming, like I really was looking up like, what's the word? I was researching a lot on material, scarf material, how I can scale it properly. What, you know, dimensions of the picture do I need to do so that when I print it onto the scarf, it's clean, it's crisp. A lot went into that, the vision itself. And yeah, all of that, when you put it all together, I don't know the proper way to calculate a piece. I will not even lie. But I price my pieces off what I feel like I would pay for example, a 36 by 36 chiffon scarf, right?
So the way you price your stuff is basically like, how much would I reasonably pay if I was buying artwork from myself?
Yeah, and because I don't just go about it in a way of like, oh, it's a piece of art, I also take into consideration like, this is an artist. This is their outlet, possibly. This is their main source of income. This is what makes them happy. This is why they have purpose. I don't just look at the product and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a decent price. It's more than that. The artist comes into play, and I respect artists of all kinds. And so that's why, you know, when I price my art, I don't look back. And so if you're an artist out there, do not price your art lower than what your value is. Respect yourself, because even if no one buys your art, there's going to be someone out there that is going to appreciate it and respect you for an artist, and they will support you in that way. But it's hard. I beat myself up all the time. Like, I've probably talked friends' ears off, like, how much would you pay? Well, how much would you pay? And at the end of the day, I think on my last project, I went with my gut, and all has turned out well. So go with your gut and respect yourself as an artist. It's not just about the product or the materials. It's way more than that. It goes way deeper. It's like who you are as a person, as an artist, your story, and why you have purpose on this earth. Yeah, I look at it with many layers. Yeah.
You said in a previous interview when I was doing research for this episode that art is a safe space for you to express your emotions.
Absolutely.
Does the space become less safe, or is that safety threatened when you start adding money into the mix? So for example, I know you're into fashion. I don't know if you ever heard of Bill Cunningham.
Mm-mm.
So Bill Cunningham was this famous photographer. He always wore like a French blue chore coat. I think he died a few years ago, but he was like a fixture. And there was a quote from him. So he must have done something to get paid, but I guess either he wasn't paid for the fashion photography directly or something happened. But because like another photographer asked him like, hey, like how much do you charge? And he's like, I never take money from any of these labels, I guess, or anybody in the world of fashion, because once you take money from them, you can't do whatever you want. If you don't take any money, you can do whatever you want. Like nobody can tell you what to do with your work. So is there a conflict? And I feel like there's so many different perspectives on this. Is there a conflict of art and capitalism? And is the conflict possibly that safety of self-expression becomes threatened because now money is involved, and depending on who's putting up the money, is it pure self-expression anymore?
Lovely
existential crisis here on the Creative Capital Show.
I'm over here like fingers crossed, like oof, cut deep. Yeah, I can talk about the conflict that I have within myself when it comes to selling my art. I think background, my job had closed indefinitely, and I took it as a sign that I needed to focus more on my art and not just go out looking for a full-time gig again. And so with this journey, I have been struggling a lot with, whoa, if I want to try to make this, a main source of income, I need to be outputting art and selling it like here and there consistently. And as an artist, I feel like to pressure yourself to constantly be creating is extremely harmful. And I continue to struggle with the money part. It's like, okay, my art's not making money right now. Like I have my business account and I'm looking at it like, all right, like how am I going to make money now when that time will come when I release my next project. But I've definitely been in a place where it's like, I'm in a weird space of seeing where I have to be to have a consistent income of money. And because I'm not there, there's this pressure that I feel to be, like I said, constantly creating, when at that point it feels like I'm just doing art to do it, when I've become an artist where what I feel gets put into my art, so I can't just create just to create. It has to come to me. I have to give myself breaks. I have to be still. When I'm still, I find myself being the most inspired and, finding the energy to have the excitement and the adrenaline to start a new project. But that's the conflict that I experience is, am I okay with not making money when I create right now? And at the end of the day, I want to say I am, but there's still parts of me that I'm like, but I wouldn't be. Like, people have asked me, oh, Paige, like, take this as a sign. Like, forget about IT. Just put all of your energy into your art. But that takes a lot. Like, God bless the IT field. I think it pays really well. And I've gotten used to making like a good income. And I don't think I'm in a place where I want to completely let that go yet, which is why I've enjoyed balancing, both my craft and like my work. But there's going to be a time where I'm going to have to completely let go and wing it. And even if I'm not consistently making like money off of my art, the more and more energy that I put into creating and releasing work, that will just come with time. But I'm always in a rock and a hard place when it comes to the topic of making money off of a craft.
So going along with that, I'd asked you to walk me through the process of selling, your selling like your first work. And you had that almost like a moment of legitimacy, I guess I would call it. Mm-hmm. So 2-part question. One, you did state you had done some art fairs and sold some pieces, but it was making the website and selling it through that like, I guess, gave you that moment of legitimacy. Why was that the dividing line? And the second part of that question, so why was that the dividing line? And do you think there's a general dividing line of somebody who does art as a hobby versus somebody who is a professional artist? Or is there such thing? Or is it just all art is art?
Let me answer the first one, and then I'll have you clarify the second one for some more. So the moment of me releasing and selling my first piece on my website, that was such a moment of legitimacy for me, instead of like, the previous art shows or fairs that I sold my art at, because I feel like I did everything by myself. Like,
so you were in control of the entire process. It wasn't like I went to an art show that already has people that go to it consistently. So like, it's like, somebody happened to buy a painting from me, not I sold a painting, like almost like that kind of thing.
It was kind of like I was in a path of them walking and they just happened to see a piece and was like, let me buy that.
Rather than what you did was everything was driven and relied solely on you.
Yes, which I was extremely proud of myself for. I think that was like the biggest moment, was like how proud I was of myself to be able to build my website, to price my work, to, clean up the website and to roll out the project and the visual and everything I did in my control, which gave me more of like a pat on the back for me. I was heavily relying on the resources that I had access to within hand's reach, The second part though, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. Is there a dividing line between somebody who does art as a hobby versus somebody who's considered like, yes, I am an artist, or like, that is what I do? Is there a dividing line, or is it just, hey, you made a scribble on a napkin. If you want to call that artwork, that's a piece of artwork now.
Absolutely. I think art is art. It always reminds me of this piece that was in the MFA back in, was it like 2017, 2018? It was a really huge canvas with just a black square. And if you look at it, it's just a black square. But if you took the time to walk up to it and to read like about the artist and, what inspired him to paint this black square, there was more of like a connection that I felt, or maybe other people felt, to the piece. I don't think there's a fine line between a professional artist or someone that just does it as a hobby. I think art is art. There's no right way of doing art. And that's what I find so beautiful about mediums and the craft itself, is that everyone can look at a different piece of art and feel differently, can interpret it differently. And at the end of the day, I feel like that is like a beautiful experience in itself. Is, you can be moved just by looking at a piece or by watching a visual. You may not relate to it. You may not relate to the story. But if you can sit there and take all of the beauty in that artist put into that piece, I think, art is art. I don't think there is a spectrum at all. Yeah.
So speaking of art and legitimacy, I want to talk about a couple highlights. Or at least in my research, what I would deem highlights. First one, the Graduate Hotel, the art residence program. Because I was looking this information up, even the way the website's structured, it was like almost like graduate of a school, graduate hotel. I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny. I want to talk about that because there's an error. Like it's weird in the sense, at least to me from an outsider looking in, it's weird in the sense of, because it's the graduate hotel and because it's not a chain, but it's not an individual. It's like a small boutique like chain. Because of the way it was presented, there's this air of legitimacy. At the same time, though, I feel like a lot of artists wouldn't think, yeah, I'm going to show my pieces in a hotel. So what was that process like, and just what was that like for you? And, how did you search that out? Did somebody come to you? Did you think it was weird you're presenting pieces in a hotel? Did the context of that make you approach the project differently? Because that seemed like an interesting project.
Yeah, it did not weird me out at all. It actually came to me. I had a booth at PBD Fest last summer selling my art, and two people came up to me talking about an art residency and how they're, taking applications and how they thought that I should apply. And so they handed me a flyer and I held on to it for like a couple of weeks. And I remember looking at it again and I was like, wait, what is this? Like, let me do some research. So I looked it up and it's hosted by Graduate Hotels, but it's actually called Sweet Dream Society. And it was founded by DJ White Shadow. And he wanted to basically create space for up-and-coming artists to utilize a studio whenever they want. You have the key to it. So the only thing they ask of you is to create a project during your time here for your semester. And so I went in, I moved all my stuff in. I came up with the project idea of this chapter I'm living in, because at that time, like, a lot was going on. A lot of changes were going on in my life. And I was appreciating friendship a lot, the reconnections that I made with a lot of friends from college, high school, and so forth. So I was able to create that project there. And they put on an art show for me in the hotel. They promoted it for me. They, printed all of the flyers. They were so helpful and just so great, and really just appreciated that I was creating as well. It was an amazing experience. That was my first solo show. They put it on in one of the ballrooms in the hotel itself. Free appetizers. They had a cash bar. It was really awesome. And then they flew out all the artists to New York for another show at Roosevelt Island's Graduate Hotel. And it was an awesome opportunity to meet all of the other artists that were in that semester. And I was able to, make great connections. And yeah, I loved that art residency. And I believe there's an artist there now, Sav. She makes rugs. Her art is amazing. And I want to say they're probably going to be accepting new applications for the next semester. But it's a great way to really support young local artists. And then for the artists themselves to use Graduate's platform, I think it's, again, a win-win for both, Graduate and the artist itself. It was an amazing experience. And I think that was a big motivator for me to want to do more with my art and to, submit my work in other places. But it was one of the best experiences that I've had yet in my art career.
Speaking of friendship, how do you approach networking with other artists and other creatives? And even beyond that, how do you approach working with, galleries, or like, I know you said the hotel came to you, but like, how do you go about like finding a gallery or finding an art fair or finding a place to do something in? So how do you go about that? And how do you network with other artists and creatives?
So networking with other artists or creatives, I feel like the events that I go to is filled with them. And I'm a very social butterfly.
Can you name some of those events?
Ooh, Crib. Shout out to Crib. Stay Silence events at Crib.
That was one of the previous episodes. Shameless self-plug. Finish this episode, then go listen to the Jay and Sabrina episode. It's really good.
Nice. Yes. all of Stay Silent events, honestly, I've met a lot of the people that I've been working with recently, I met through those events. And so, yeah, that's where I usually meet creatives, or on social media, to be honest. I'll come across someone's page, follow them. We'll end up exchanging some words in the DMs, and maybe that leads to a project. But yeah, I would say the local events, social media. And then when it comes to showcasing my art in galleries or at exhibitions, it's usually word of mouth. Someone will tell me or send me a link like, oh, this application's open, and I'll apply for it. But yeah, that's usually how I submit my art, is word of mouth or just looking up showcases and galleries online. Recently, I just went to Mad Dog Studios to apply for a private studio that I'm going to be renting. And just in a span of 30 minutes, I met like 3 creatives, like a painter, a jeweler, and the woman who actually runs the place makes leather bags. So just like going out and, finding a studio led me to that. They also have gallery space there, which, I was told I could use. So it's usually naturally I find like opportunities with networking. It's never really forceful, but if I am looking for something specifically, I'll just start researching online, which there's a lot of galleries that I feel like people wouldn't know about. But if you just look online, they just list them all out. And I'll usually read like the qualifications and what it would take for me to submit my work. But yeah, I would say I just put myself out there. Like I always have the mindset of like, what do I have to lose? And it's fun. The process of meeting new people and, learning about their work, it's really fun. And it just creates endless opportunities for more collaboration.
So you talk about making your own website and putting yourself out there in social media. And I want to reference the Ain't Gotta Try projects. I noticed the YouTube videos for it. And it brings up a question. Do you think that there is an advantage, or that more artists in general should document their process and put it out there? Because I know some people are very secretive about their process, or it's like they value it almost much as they're very precious about it.
Yeah.
Some people, it's like a money thing. Some people are like, whatever, I don't want a camera on me 24/7. Some people don't want to put it online. But do you think there is an advantage? Because it makes me wonder, like, what if, I don't know, like, imagine if Instagram existed when like Michelangelo was doing the frescoes, and he just like, would it have had like, as ridiculous as that sounds, like, would it have had the same impact, Like, so I wonder, like, should artists be documenting more, or does the documentation make people's eyes glaze over, and is the art less special because you're documenting every little step in the process? Does it make it less special, or does it make it easier for people to connect with that artist, so when that piece does come out, everybody's super excited?
Yeah, I'm going to be extremely biased, and this is just my opinion. I think documenting your process can allow your audience to connect with you and to feel more intrigued with the art or the products they are selling. I also understand why some artists don't like to be in the spotlight, whether that's, shyness, or some artists I know are like, I don't want people to be focused on me. I want them to be focused on the product, and that's solely it, which I respect. But me personally, I feel as if documenting your work, you're showing vulnerability. And I think vulnerability opens the door to deeper connections. And for me personally, I have found more success with people sharing how they've been inspired by some of my work when I've been more vulnerable with the story behind my project and documenting me brainstorming or me painting, and, even the visuals, like, with my visuals, I love to portray a story. And if I'm portraying a story, like, it's with the intention that I want people to feel moved in some way. And because I've let those walls down a bit, I have found that people connect with me more. So I always am a big fan. And whenever I am talking with friends that are also creatives, I'm always that hype friend where I'm like, are you documenting? Are you putting videos out there? Like, do it. So I'm a big fan, but that's me being biased. I love when artists show like raw, uncut clips of themselves, like home video style. I think I've always been very fond of home videos. I grew up, my parents documented everything. Like I have CD discs of every birthday, like every Christmas, anything, even me taking the camera and doing like an MTV crib tour. Like I find that translates in my work to this day is like the home video feeling, which I think just makes the work more personal. I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing other artists do the same.
Do you think, with all that being said about documentation and making that connection, do you think artists of your generation and even the generation of artists that come after you, do you think that you or they have it easier than artists of the past, considering now that it doesn't really take a lot of money to do the art or document the process? Like before, like if you wanted, like you had to go buy a video camera and film or hire a crew to like make a documentary. Now it's like,
just do it with your phone.
You could just get your friend with a phone, and then edit it on the phone. You don't even need the laptop technically anymore, and you don't need a theater. You can put it out on YouTube and then tell people on social media instead of having to like make flyers. Like, please come to my screening of my documentary that I made myself about this show that I'm going to have at a gallery that I rented through a service I found online. Like.
I think
and you can do all this from your phone now. So I wonder, but is that a double-edged sword? Like, because you also said earlier that there's just more now and there's more to sift through. So do you think your generation has it easier, harder, or is it a double-edged sword where, these things are easier, but now these other things are harder and it's just like the scales have just balanced out a certain way?
I wouldn't say I think it's easier for my generation or the generation after me. I wouldn't use easier as the word. I would say we are, how do I want to word this? I feel as if we have technology in the palm of our hands, and as damaging that as technology can be in some way, I think we have the capability and the tools to use it to our advantage. So I don't know if it would make it easier when it comes to your craft, but I think you can do so much with technology, right? Like we were saying, YouTube videos, TikTok, Reels on Instagram, your website. There's much more of a presence for people in maybe another country to see your work that if you didn't have technology, maybe only, the city of Pawtucket would be able to view your work. I wouldn't say easier because I know there's still trials and tribulations that come with everyone's craft. But I always like to say, like, use it to your advantage. I feel like we were the generation of like, as technology was climbing, and I feel like the younger generations know how to use it the best. So why not use it to your advantage when it comes to your craft? I like to use it to my advantage. It makes it fun. But
so with all that being said, what is your opinion on, and because you have a background in IT and we were talking about this earlier as well, what is your opinion on AI generated art? And how do you think that's going to affect you?
Yeah.
Has that affected you? Are you worried about it affecting you more? Are you thinking about utilizing it in your artwork? Is there things about the legality of it? Like,
it's very sad. I think it's brilliant. I think it's very impressive. Being in IT, like I can have an appreciation for AI. But when it comes to art, it's extremely depressing. I was actually just talking to someone about this, and I told them, I feel like it's a cop-out. I feel like when it comes to art is like an extension of yourself, right? I say like, I use art for self-expression, but it legitimately is an extension of me. Like, no matter if it's a canvas I'm painting, if it's a scarf, if it's a visual I'm editing, anything, the creative direction, that is a part of who I am. And to use AI to try to paint that picture for me, it just feels like you're selling yourself short. And I feel like it takes away from the experience. How I was saying, like, I like to learn about the artist. I don't just look at the piece or the product. I like to know the story behind it. What were they feeling as they were creating? Like, that makes the experience that much more spiritual for me, which I enjoy. And I feel like AI is kind of ripping that away from people. But I respect it. I think the AI art that I have seen, it's beautiful. I don't know have you seen the Barbie dogs on TikTok?
Yes, I have.
Like, clever, right? But
like, can that be considered a talent? Like, is that going to be like the new artistic talent, is like how creative and crazy the prompts can get, you know? And then it's like, if you want to sell that, can you make money off it? Because right now you can't copyright AI generated art, but is that going to change? Whereas like, if I type in the style of like, because I think Grimes is doing this with their music. Like, if you want to use my voice for AI generated art, I'll do a 50-50 split with you. So is there going to be mechanisms where it's like, hey, I want to make a computer desktop wallpaper in this dimension in the abstract spray paint style of a Paige Huggon piece.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I generate that, like in the future, will I pay that AI generated site like, all right, here's X amount of money for the original digital image. Paige gets a cut. We as the platform get a cut, but like Paige gets the bulk of it. Oh, you want it printed on canvas? Okay, we'll print it on canvas at our factory. Paige gets a cut of that because you did it in the style of that. Like, will there be pre-approved prompts of like, is that how Etsy's going to work in the future?
So
you know,
scary. Like, it's really scary. I don't know if I'd be a big fan of that, but that's coming from me at where I'm at now with my art. Who knows? I may open my mind to it in the future, but that would, I don't think I would like that. It's just kind of like you're taking a piece of work and now you're just elaborating onto it, which is kind of destructing the initial story behind that piece or that initial feeling that was put into a piece. It doesn't sit right yet, but AI is it's scary, and I'm concerned, but I'm also, like I said, very impressed from a technological standpoint.
How did you get involved working with Bodega? Because that's how funny enough, that's how I knew you. It's like, were you in the Beams X Bodega campaign? And like, Beams X Adidas X Bodega campaign. And you were like, yeah. And I'm like, how'd you get involved with that?
Honestly, it was one day. I pay close attention to my email, but I had gotten this email asking me if I would be interested, and the IT in me was like, oh, this is a phishing email. Like, they're asking for my information. And so I almost marked it as a phishing email. But then I looked at like the sender and the domain, and I was like, this is a legitimate domain. And I looked it up. I was doing heavy research. I will say I was doing like research for an hour. But it ended up being legitimate. And shout out to Drew. I believe he got that gig for me. But that was a dope experience. I've been, loving Bodega since my college days. I used to take the train.
Wait, can you elaborate on what Bodega is and what? Because I know I mentioned it and we know, but anybody listening may not know what the heck we're talking about.
Bodega is, how would you explain it? It's like a streetwear boutique in Boston on, I think, Clearwater Street. But they sell a lot of different like streetwear brands, clothes, sneakers. But they also do a lot of collaboration with some dope brands. And yeah, this one was the Beams Adidas collab.
Kind of very like collegiate heavy feeling.
Yeah.
Considering where they are in Boston, it made sense.
It was really fun. it was super new to me. I never have gotten like a gig like that. But it made me excited again to model. I hadn't been modeling in a while. So I had a lot of fun and I met a lot of great people and everyone that...
Did they approach you to model specifically or did they approach you for something else? And then they were like, hey, by the way, do you want to model? Or?
They approached me specifically for modeling.
Oh,
yeah.
Did they find you from your website or were you still modeling on and off?
I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was through Drew and I probably through Instagram. I don't know. I never asked. Okay. I honestly never asked. I just showed up and I was like, I'm happy to be here. And so I will do anything.
Yeah, you're like, all right, let's go.
No, it was an awesome experience. It honestly made me want to model more. That's another thing that I used to do a lot in college is model. And then, after college, I kind of dropped that a little bit. But the bodega experience, it was really exciting. I had a lot of fun with everyone on the set. And just watching the way that the creative directors and the photographers work, I love being surrounded by that type of talent. So not only what was, out getting this amazing opportunity, I was able to, connect with others and to see them in their element and to be inspired by them. It was all around like an amazing experience. I'm very appreciative.
Speaking of amazing experiences that you're appreciative of, how did you get into Visual? Is it Visual or Visuals magazine?
Oh, Visual magazine.
Visual magazine. How did that happen? How did you get in there? Because I know you had like a 2-page interview in there. You were featured in there. How did that all come about, and how did that make you feel? Like when, like from however the contact was, whether you reached out to them, they reached out to you, from that point till you actually saw you could hold the magazine in your hand and see yourself in it. Like, can you just describe that whole process?
Yes. Shout out to Visual Mag. Shout out to Rita Tanega. She actually is the founder of that magazine. She also lives in Pawtucket. She is my best friend. But that came about, I didn't know her at the time when I applied. I forget how I came across it. I think I came across it somewhere on Instagram. It was like 2019. I was at work. And I was looking at it and the theme was, what is your why? And I was like, ooh, this is perfect. Like, so I submitted my artwork and immediately, I got a response back from Rita. And there was a photo shoot that we did with a bunch of other women artists who are all beautiful and extremely talented. And that's where I started forming my friendship with Rita. And it's become stronger ever since. She is out of this world when it comes to her creativity and her magazine. I forget how many issues she has now. I think she's coming out with, I hope I'm not wrong, like the 14th issue. I was issue number 7. But when I actually got the magazine in my hand, I was so excited. I remember, I think I bought like 4 or 5 copies. I wanted one for my future, apartment. I was living with my parents at the time. I got one for family members. And it was exciting to be able to hold something and to flip to a page where like, not just like is a picture of me there, but like my story's now put out there. And that experience itself, I was able to meet a lot of great artists and still be in touch with them to this day. But yeah, I love Visual Magazine. She always showcases the most beautiful work from a bunch of local artists, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, from all areas. Yeah, I love it. It's great.
What advice would you give either to a younger Paige or a artist that's maybe in their teens or in high school now? Like, what advice would you give to the next generation of artists coming up?
The first thing that like resonated was, what would you tell younger Paige?
We can go with that too.
I mean, yeah, we'll put it hand in hand, honestly. And I mean, the advice I'd give younger me goes for anyone, but don't give a bleep about what anyone thinks. Be fearless. If you genuinely enjoy what it is you do, no matter what anyone has to say, whether it's, oh, that's not going to make you money. If it makes you happy, be fearless and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. If there's walls up, challenge yourself to break them, because as you're breaking them, I think it evolves you as an artist, and it adds a sense of beauty to the art that you're creating. Be raw, be unapologetically yourself, and I will leave it at that. Because that's what I tell myself. I try to tell myself that every day is I'm unapologetically me, and I love it. And not only am I being myself, I'm creating art that makes me excited. And isn't that like what life's about? Is being love, spreading love, being happy.